Welcome to Faith Talks, a monthly program on the Generation podcast designed to help young ladies discover greater ways to nurture and exercise their faith in their day-to-day walk with Christ.
Hello, I'm Janna Faith.
And I'm Janna Faith.
And welcome to episode 14 of Faith Talks. And you might be saying, wait, did you get a replacement for Anna Faith? Well, we're not trying to, but actually she wasn't feeling the best today, so she couldn't come in. But you heard another Janna Faith, and that's actually the daughter of somebody who we have coming to speak with us today, Mrs. Mueller. So I'm really excited about her being able to kind of share her story and her family's journey, really. Just one thing I thought I'd mention from the last podcast. You might have heard that we were trying to grow a garden with my sister, Stephanie. And that's true. We did plant a lot of seeds in a big garden. But I thought I would update you. We haven't had anything come up yet. So we're still having faith that those seeds do work. It's been about, I think, 5 weeks. So we'll see if anything comes up. But Mrs. Mueller was saying sometimes it takes 6 to 8. So we might just need a little more patience. I'm not sure. So anyway, today we have with us Mrs. Mueller. So could you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I'm Mary Jane, and I have 2 older brothers and 3 younger sisters. And both of my brothers are married and are missionaries. I'm an aunt, the favorite aunt, to 27 nieces and nephews. And I've been married to my best friend, Evangelist Joe Mueller, for the last 10 years. We got married on St. Patrick's Day.
Oh.
So I have 7 fun-loaded kiddos. The youngest one is 1, and the oldest one is 9. And we have an awesome watchdog that helps keep them in the yard. So I love activity, which my kids help me out with that. Just people cooking, cleaning, traveling, pretty much anywhere, animals and tea. And yeah, I'm kind of addicted to tea.
What's your favorite kind?
Chai.
Okay.
Like vanilla chai, to be specific. But yep.
Oh, that's good. Especially this kind of weather around springtime. It's like perfect to just sit down with your cup of tea.
Yep.
Or coffee. Although I suppose tea is probably a little better for you. I don't know.
I don't know either. I just like the way it tastes better.
Yeah. Okay. Well, why don't you just start by telling us, I know you're going to share a little bit of your family's history. So just about how that started, even maybe before you were born.
Okay, my mom got saved as a young child, but she didn't grow up in a Christian home. And my dad grew up in a very solid Catholic family. But just a month before I was born, my dad was listening to Charles Stanley on the TV, and that's when he first really understood the gospel. And so he got saved. And that was about a month before I was born, so I've had the privilege of having Christian parents all my life. And then my mom, once she started having kids, that's really when she started seeking God. And just with the world around us, she was just so burdened that her kids would come to the marriage altar pure, and she had no idea how that was even possible. And so she just cried out to God. And I guess that was really the beginning of my family's journey of faith, because it was an impossibility that my mom chose to believe God in.
And did she get saved before your dad, or was that?
Yes, as a young child.
Okay, so she was saved already, and then your dad got saved a month before you were born.
Yep.
Okay, wow.
Yep. So we lived in Buffalo, New York at the time, just a few minutes from Niagara Falls. So right before I turned 6, my family moved to Menominee Falls area, and we moved here just in time for the very first Holiness Conference at Falls Baptist Church. And there, my family heard truth that they had never heard before, and our way of living was challenged by the Word of God, and Mom and Dad began to just take steps of obedience, and things around our house began to change. And us kids really didn't like all the changes that we were going through, but since we were the kids, we really didn't have a choice in the matter. So we were just following whatever mom and dad decided to do. So like the things that we watched on TV changed, the way we dressed, that began to change. Music that we listened to began to change, and it was changing throughout my elementary years. And really that seemed like another impossibility for us kids because we were ridiculed by cousins and even sometimes aunts and uncles, and then especially my dad's parents, would question the steps of faith that my parents were taking and try to turn us kids against my parents. So that was hard for us kids, but mom and dad, they just stuck to it, and they were going to believe God no matter what was going on. And once I entered junior high, there was a point where there was a young boy, he was 6 at the time, that I was caring for off and on, and he and I were really close, and he died of neuroblastoma, a form of cancer, and that was really difficult for me. I was right there by his side just the day before he died, and I still was in denial that he was going to die. I just so badly wanted him to get better. So when I realized he was gone, I was kind of in shock for a while, but then I became angry at God for that, and that led me into bitterness, which then led into other sin issues in my life that I hid from my parents, and my parents, they're really hard to hide things from.
That's good.
Yes, it's really good. But we had such an open communication in our home with our parents. So it wasn't easy, but I stopped reading my Bible. I would still write stuff in my journal because they would always be watching us kids, maybe not necessarily reading what we were writing, but they saw that I was writing stuff in it, so everything looked good still. And then I kept up on my Christian literature reading because that was kind of a required thing in our home to do. And during that time, I read a book called Invasion of Whales by the Holy Spirit through Evan Roberts. And in there is a message by Evan Roberts. And he had 4 main points that he was focusing on. And one of the points had in there something about there being a cloud between you and God. Get rid of it. And I felt like God was talking to me right then. And I don't know how to describe this, but I literally could not read anymore after that. I kept trying to continue reading the book, and I couldn't. It was the weirdest thing. I could read the message over and over again, but I could not get past that. And the conviction was so strong. And I just remember standing up in my bedroom and tossing the book on the floor and looking out my bedroom window and saying, if you don't want me to read it, then fine, I won't. And I walked out my bedroom. But God did not let me go. Over the course of the next few months, there were different things that came up, and there was a victory conference that happened right after that, and your dad actually spoke a message on sin, and I remember lots of kids coming up to the platform afterward to give testimony, and I was under such conviction during that time. And then just the next week, I think, they had a bonfire service, and lots of kids were getting right with God then too. And then your dad preached again. I think it was a Wednesday night service. And it was during that service that I broke and I got right with my mom. And really it was kind of a humbling experience because my brother had taken her out one way to go talk to her. So I thought, well, I'll just slip out now and no one will know that I'm actually going to go talk to my mom. So I went out the other end of the pew. And when while I was going down the aisle on the other side, my brother and my mom came walking back in. And I knew God was trying to humble me. So I had to turn around, go all the way back up the aisle, go through the pew to my mom. And then we left and I got right with her. And I had to get right with some other leaders in my life. But that really then was the turning point of me riding on my parents' faith to me embracing it as my own. And God showed me that he was more interested in my walk with him than I was, really. So,
and would that have been in high school or?
That was my 9th grade year.
Okay.
So, yeah, my 9th grade year. And then we traveled to my family took a couple different missions trips at that time. And God he just continued to work in my life. I saw so many answers to prayer. Like it was just neat because it seemed like I just knew when I prayed God was going to answer. There was no doubt in it, and God did.
You didn't have that cloud between him.
Yeah, it was so neat. And then even when I entered college, I was involved in our RU Kids Club ministry, and we saw God doing so many things there. I traveled to Fiji and was there for 2 weeks and saw God do amazing things there as well. But during my sophomore year of college, God gave me an opportunity that was another impossibility, and that was a paper class for Sunday school, and basically it was a list of non-attending enrollees. And so I was supposed to get these enrollees to come to my class. So there were 2 Sundays where it was just me, no one there, and I had made phone calls and visits, and there was nothing with that class. Like, they weren't there. They weren't out there. So in desperation, I just asked God to build my class for me, and I went out soul winning and was down on Congress out in Milwaukee and came to a group of kids, about 8 kids, standing on a street corner. And it was like they were just standing there. They weren't really doing anything, so I went over there with a wordless book, and they all came running to me, and I just gave them the gospel. And all 8 of them got saved.
Oh.
And 7 of the 8 were the age group that I was teaching in, 3rd grade Sunday school. So I was like, hey, do you guys want to go to my Sunday school class? I don't have anyone in my class. And they were all about it, and they all were there that Sunday.
Is so neat.
And that was just a demonstration of God answering my prayer.
Literally gathering them and putting them on the street
Yes.
corner for you.
Yes.
Here's your class.
Exactly. It was so awesome. And our class grew throughout the year. By the time I was moving out of elementary as a teacher and moving into youth, that class we had 15 kids, and that was just through soul winning every week. And it was so neat, in their faith was such a challenge to me too. Like, if someone had a question about how can God do this, another kid would answer before I did. Like, he's God, he can do that. And so really that was my theme for that year, was he's God, he can do that. Like, why even question who he is? Because he's God. And then after that, I traveled on the COLA class team, and again saw God answer prayer time and time again, even in impossible situations, holding back rain or bringing kids out that we hadn't been able to find before, or whatever. It was just, or a rowdy crowd. That was probably the most challenging one, when the crowd was just not listening, and God would break, and it would just be complete silence, and loads of them would get saved. And that was just neat to see how God was working in there. So then my senior year of college, I was working for my dad. I had 2 different jobs working for him just to pay off my school bill, and really there was no way I could actually do it all. I was working crazy hours and still trying to juggle it all with my schoolwork. And but then my last semester, my dad got an email from the college letting them know that someone had paid off my college bill for me.
Wow.
And that was just another answer to prayer that I've been asking God for, and he did it.
That's a definite faith journey. Bills are. There was a senior that was actually just talking to me this morning, and they were putting their last check in to pay their school bill. So they put it in a box with confetti and balloons and all this stuff. And then at the bottom is the check. I'm like, hopefully the office can find the check at the bottom. So anyway, but
It's funny.
it's a definite victory. And then when you graduated, I'm sure there were more faith steps that God brought you to.
Yes. One of those things was I was planning on working at a camp that summer, and I had already put in my application, talked to the folks about it, and a week before I graduated, my mom approached me and told me that I wasn't going to be working at that camp this summer, and didn't really give me a reason why, and that was kind of a blow to me because I worked at that camp for retreats and stuff and loved the camp. My family grew up going to that camp for lots of different things, and so that was really hard for me. My brother was still going to be going to work as an intern, so like the circumstances just didn't make sense to me. And at first I began to question, but then I just remember, okay, this is my parents' decision, and I'm still under my parents, so I just need to trust them and know that God's working it all together for my good. And it wasn't until after graduation that I understood why I wasn't going to camp. My parents, the Saturday after graduation, took me out to eat, and there they were just asking me questions about the future, and they pulled out this little questionnaire that they wanted me to fill out. And I just remember looking down at the piece of paper, and the very first question was, why do you think you need a husband? And I was like, what? What's this all about? And my dad's like, well, you never know, after you graduate, there's always a possibility, and we just want to know where you stand on the area of marriage and all that. And I hadn't really thought about marriage because I was doing Are You Kids Club, I was a teen teacher, and I just loved doing ministry stuff, and I was so busy doing all these things that I just didn't even think about marriage, so it kind of threw me off guard. And so I just said, well, I never said I needed a husband. And my mom said, well, that's okay, you can write that down. So I did, wrote that down, didn't think much about it. And then I just went through the questionnaire, and the very last question was something about future ministry. What did I think God had called me to, or what did I think I might be involved in as far as ministry? And so I had written down something along the lines of traveling around the world and throughout the states, doing gospel work and helping churches out. And my dad's like, so how is that going to work out? I'm like, I don't know. That's just what I'm passionate about doing. And after I filled it out, we talked through it. And one of the things on there, too, was something about what I thought or what I would like in a godly husband, character qualities. And I can't remember all the things I put, but one funny thing was my dad said, well, would you like it if he was musical, had like a great singing voice or something like that? And I was like, well, if he's singing to me while I'm the one outside chopping wood, that's not going to work out. And my mom's like, yeah, that's good, honey. That's good. So I had no idea that my dad was hinting someone to me. It was just very funny. And yes, Joe can chop wood.
Do you sing to him while he chops wood?
No.
You help him chop wood.
We actually haven't done it together.
That's funny.
So, but he's a very good hard worker. So I actually haven't chopped wood since I got married because we don't have a fireplace like we did when I was growing up. But after our talk and stuff, my dad said, well, I just want to let you know that we have another questionnaire that a guy filled out concerning a wife. And I felt I was like, what? Oh no. Because I was just totally expecting that, I didn't know anyone was interested. And I don't know, I just felt like I'll have to say no to whoever it is. And I'll have to worry about some guy who's just totally crushed because I said no. But anyway, they pulled it out and told me that they had already gone out to eat with the Mueller parents. And I was totally shocked that it was Joe because, we were in the same class together, but he just seemed so far above me spiritually. And I just was so blown away. And I just remember asking Mom and Dad, like, why me? Why did he want me? And Mom said, well, I think God told him you were the right one. And right away I was just, God's in this because this was totally not on my radar. So anyway, we walked through his questionnaire, but I wasn't really paying attention to all the other questions he had filled out. I just wanted to know what his ministry calling was. That's what was important to me. So I remember looking back at his questionnaire, and I was so shocked. What he wrote down for ministry was almost word for word what I had written down. And as soon as I saw that, God just filled my heart with peace. And I just, wow, this is God. This is not me. And my dad asked me, do you want to pray about it? I was like, well, I could, but I just feel like this is so God. I would be disobeying if I said no. But along with the peace came an excitement to nervousness and stuff. Joe had been praying for me up to that point for 3 years. And I had no clue about that, but that just made me even a little more settled in my spirit because he had seen everything there was to see about me. There was nothing to hide. He had already been watching. So then we began our courtship. He was traveling that summer on an ensemble. We talked twice a week, an hour each time. And that's how we basically got to know each other better. But even through that, we wanted our relationship to be completely focused on God. So we did a Bible study together that Jim Berg had put together, created for his glory. And then we also memorized John 13 through 17 together. So in those 1 hour talks that we had, we were doing our Bible study and quoting our verses together. So it wasn't like there was a lot of chit chat going on. We did email every day, back and forth. Him telling me what he was doing on the road and me telling him about what was going on in Kids Club and the soul winning opportunities and different things going on. But that just helped us to stay focused in our relationship. And then after we got engaged, he would call and we would just spend 15, 20 minutes a night praying together and discussing future ministry and then basically what we wanted as a family, like what our family goals would be. And staying focused on that. But even in our engagement, there were steps of faith that were being taken, just moments where we were trusting God. I remember there were a couple times, like there was a time around Thanksgiving that looked like a possible wedding date, but he was dorm supervisor at the time, and we had apartments, and we only could have 3 last names in an apartment, and he was sharing an apartment. And just the way things worked out, we couldn't move guys around so that he and I would be able to have the apartment together. So that date didn't work out. And then there was another date that came up, but it didn't work with the church calendar, so that closed down. Then there was another one a little after Christmas that we were looking at, and I remember him calling, and that wasn't going to work out. And I just remember, okay, we just need to stop trying to figure out wedding dates and trust God. God put this whole thing together, so we just need to trust him. And so we did stop figuring it out. We just were letting God take care of it. And March 17th was a date that came up, and Joe talked to Pastor about it. And the way the dorm situation worked out at that time, Joe was in an apartment all by himself, second semester, so that worked out great. And I just remember I prayed about it that morning, God, if there's I didn't know about the date yet, but I just remember saying, God, if there's an opening, would you just reveal it to Pastor and to Joe at the right time? And I'm just going to let go and trust you for it. And then that night at church, my dad and Pastor were talking, and Pastor just brought up that Joe had talked to him about a certain date, and he looked at his email and told us what date it was. And I remember going home and counting the days, and it was 58 days away.
Wow, that's quick.
I was like, well, God did this, so he can put the whole wedding together, and God did. So many people helped us, and things like my wedding dress was custom made for me for free. And God just gave us so many things and covered the expenses and stuff like that. So that was just neat how God took care of that. So then we started our family really quick after that. So we got married in March, and our first child was born January the following year. And we had kids back to back really fast. When Karis, our oldest, was just 5 months old, we went to Cameroon, West Africa, and God taught us so much there. I got very, very sick a week after we got there, and I was in bed for basically until we came home 7 weeks later. And I really struggled. God, why did you send us here? He miraculously provided it for us to come. And I still don't know all the reasons, but looking back, I can see God's hand even in that time. And then I guess another really big faith step that we had was with my little Janna Faith,
who is here right now.
Listening to us.
Yes, you might have heard her coloring some pictures. We'll have to look at those at the end. I'm sure they're pretty.
She's a good colorer. But when she was still in the oven, we had an ultrasound to see if we were having a boy or a girl, and we were very excited. We were having another girl for our oldest girl. We had a girl and then 2 boys, and Janna was the next girl we had. And I just remember while we were looking at the ultrasound, I said to my husband, something doesn't look right. Something's not right. And I could tell by his face that he had seen it too. But the tech didn't say anything about it, which I don't think they're actually supposed to say anything, but she didn't show any signs of concern or anything at that moment, but she was spending a lot of time looking at a certain area. And once we got back to my parents' house, my parents were watching the other 3 kids at that time. Right when we pulled in the driveway, my doctor called Joe, which usually doctors don't do that. Usually the nurse calls me, but the doctor called Joe and asked if I was with him and asked if he could just stay with me for a little while because he had some concerning news, and let us know that in the ultrasound it showed that Janna had a chromosome issue and it would affect her kidneys, I think it was, and that we were going to have multiple ultrasounds just to see how quickly they were going to have to take action after she was born. And he said worst case scenario, she would be on dialysis for the rest of her life, or they would do a kidney transplant. And so that was very concerning at first, but I just remember being in the car right after Joe told me the news and saying, God, this child's yours, and you can do anything. If you want her to have this issue, we accept that. But like for her sake, I really don't want her to have to go through dialysis week after week. And but we're willing to do whatever you want us to do. And God gave me peace about it then. And then in the weeks and months that came after that, when we were having ultrasounds checking the chromosome issue, I remember God just really brought me to a point of he could do this. He could heal her. He made her and he could heal her. He could take care of it. And it wasn't just because I wanted it. It was like God just gave me this convincement that he was going to take care of it. And I remember mentioning that to Joe just really to see if this was just my idea or this was really from the Lord. And Joe said God had given him the same convincement that he was going to heal her. And during that time, God gave us her name, Janna Faith. And I remember telling the technician at the hospital, or the doctor at the hospital, that this is what our God had told us he was going to do. And the very last ultrasound we had with her, which was just right before she was born, the doctor had said something to us about, like, you guys had been praying for her to be healed or whatever. And I said, yes. And I know she's going to be. And he showed us the ultrasound and said, it's all clear. Wow. It's completely clear. And that was just, it wasn't a shock because I knew God was going to do it. But it was very thrilling at the same time just to see. It was a testimony to the doctor.
And that's an example of, like, we're on Faith Talking. You know, it would have been easier to believe it for yourself, but then not say something to the doctor, but even just putting it out there shows you're trusting him to do it, and he did.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, God had brought us to such convincement that it wasn't unnatural to actually say something to the doctor. It was just part of the conversation. And that was just really neat. But again, God taking something that was impossible and just bringing us to faith that he was going to do it, and we just needed to trust him with it.
Now, in your reading of the Bible, has there been any Bible characters that have stood out to you along the lines of faith, just their faith steps they took?
Joseph and Daniel both have really stuck out to me. Joseph in particular, because his life reminds me so much of my mom and dad's life. God pulling them both out of their families and them taking stands to do what's right when it seemed like they were totally alone. I mean, Joseph was in a country and he was the only one. You know, he was completely alone, and he still had faith in God. He never let go of the vision that God gave him. And then Daniel, too, you know, he was in a country that was a godless nation, but he did have friends with him to support him, but he also had those Israelites who did not support him, you know, and he stuck to it and just believed God, and God delivered in impossible circumstances because of his faith.
Well, thank you so much for coming in today and just taking the time out of your schedule and for bringing your little daughter. Yeah. It's been fun having her in here with us today. And I was really blessed by her story, just thinking about all the impossibilities she faced, whether it was as a child and her parents taking those steps of faith, or even in college or after college, but just your perspective of even your Sunday school kids, God's God, he can do it. So just remember, listeners out there, as you face impossibilities throughout your life this week,
faith doesn't just talk, it walks.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Generation Podcast. If you're serious about living a life of total surrender and total dependence, please consider signing the Generation Pledge. It's not a promise of perfection, but a declaration of direction. To join hundreds of others who have signed the commitment, please visit thegeneration.org/pledge. That's THEE generation.org/pledge.